My 9-year-old granddaughter looked up from her pasta and sneered. "You can't sit with us." Mom said, "You're just a charity case." The entire table burst out laughing, including my own son. I didn't scream. I just stood up and walked out. The next morning, my son texted me, "At the dealership, send the money now." I answered, "A charity case has no money to give." 10 minutes later, total panic. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me tell you how a grandmother's silence became the loudest revenge a family ever heard. They say blood is thicker than water. But let me tell you, after 68 years on this earth, I've learned that money is thicker than both. It binds people together. It keeps secrets hidden, and sometimes it is the only reason people still answer your phone calls. I stood outside the heavy glass doors of L'Osteria, the kind of Italian restaurant where a plate of pasta costs more than my weekly grocery bill. I smoothed the front of my dress. It was a nice dress, a navy blue one I've had for 5 years. It was clean pressed and respectable. But I knew just from looking through the window at my daughter-in-law, Tricia, that I was going to look out of place. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil and expensive perfume. I clutched the gift bag in my hand a little tighter. It wasn't a big gift. It was a savings bond for my granddaughter, Lorraine, and a beautiful leather-bound journal. She was turning 9 today. 9 years old. Old enough to read, old enough to write, and as I was about to find out, old enough to break a grandmother's heart. I walked to the table. They were already seated in the center of the room. Tricia was wearing something sparkly and low-cut. My son Oscar was laughing at something she said, his face flushed with wine. Lorraine was playing on her iPad, ignoring the guests around her. "Hello, everyone," I said, putting on my best smile. Tricia looked up. Her eyes did that thing where they scanned me from head to toe and dismissed me in a second. "Oh, Diane, you made it. We almost ordered without you. Pull up a chair on the end. Not Mom, not Grandma, just Diane." And the end of the table, the spot where the waiter stands. I sat down. "Happy birthday, Lorraine," I said softly, sliding the gift bag toward her. Lorraine barely looked up from her screen. "Thanks," she mumbled. She didn't open it. She just pushed it aside like it was a napkin. "Lorraine, look at Grandma when she speaks to you," Oscar said, but there was no weight in his voice. He was too busy looking at the wine list. "It's fine, Oscar," I said. I didn't want to cause a scene. Not tonight. "So how is everyone? How is work?" Tricia clapped her hands together, her bracelets jingling. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her friend, confidentially speaking loud enough for the next table to hear. "Work is amazing. Actually, we have big news. Huge news." She paused for dramatic effect. I took a sip of water. "We are picking up the new SUV tomorrow morning," Tricia announced, beaming the top-of-the-line model leather-heated seats, panoramic sunroof, the works. Finally, a car that matches our status in this neighborhood. I froze. A new SUV. Oscar had told me last week that things were tight. He had asked me to cover the property tax on their house. My house technically, since my name was on the deed because his bonus hadn't come through. I had written a check without a question. I always did. "That sounds expensive," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Tricia laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Quality costs money, Diane. But you know what they say. You have to spend money to make money. We need to look the part." I looked at Oscar. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was suddenly very interested in his bread roll. Dinner arrived and the conversation flowed around me, not with me. They talked about vacations in Aspen private school galas and kitchen renovations. I ate my soup quietly. I watched Lorraine. She was eating her spaghetti with her mouth open, sauce staining her chin, her elbows planted firmly on the tablecloth. I raised 3 children. I taught them that manners are a reflection of respect for others. It was a habit I couldn't break. "Lorraine, honey." I whispered, leaning an elbows off the table. "Please," and try to chew with your mouth closed. A young lady shouldn't smack her lips. The table went silent. Lorraine stopped chewing. She slowly lowered her fork. She looked at me, and her eyes weren't the innocent eyes of a 9-year-old. They were cold, They were Trisha's eyes. "Mom says I don't have to listen to you," Lorene said loudly. The chatter at the nearby tables died down. People were looking. I felt my face heat up. "Excuse me." Lorraine wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Mom says you're old-fashioned and that you're just a charity case." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Charity case. Lorraine. I gasped. I looked at Trisha, waiting for her to scold her daughter, waiting for her to apologize. But Trisha wasn't scolding her. She was smirking. She took a sip of her wine and shrugged. "Well, kids repeat what they hear. Diane, she's just honest." I turned to my son, my Oscar, the boy I had nursed through fevers, the boy whose college tuition I paid by working double shifts after my husband died, the man whose lifestyle I was currently funding. "Oscar," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you hear what she said? Tell her." Oscar looked uncomfortable. He loosened his tie. He looked at his wife, then at his daughter, and finally briefly at me. "She's just a kid. Mom," he said, letting out a nervous, wheezing laugh. "Don't be so sensitive. Besides, Trisha isn't entirely wrong. I mean, look at this dinner. We are paying for your meal, aren't we? Just let it go. We are paying for your meal." The room seemed to tilt. The noise of the restaurant rushed back in, but it sounded distant, like I was underwater. I looked at the steak on Oscar's plate. $55. I looked at the wine Trisha was drinking. $120 a bottle. I looked at the diamond earrings in Trisha's ears, a Christmas gift from Oscar 2 years ago, paid for with the emergency loan I gave him. And then it hit me. The realization was colder than the water in my glass. Oscar hadn't just been borrowing money from me, he had been lying to them. He had been painting a picture where he was the big successful provider, and I was the poor destitute mother he dragged along out of pity. They didn't know. Trisha didn't know I paid the mortgage on the 4-bedroom colonial they lived in. Lorene didn't know I paid the $2,000 a month tuition for her private school. They didn't know that the bonus Oscar used for the down payment on that SUV was actually a transfer from my retirement savings account that he begged for yesterday. To them, I was a burden, a charity case, a nobody who got a free bowl of soup. I looked at Oscar again. He was smiling now, relieved that he had sided with his wife, relieved the awkward moment was over. He thought he had one. He thought I would just swallow it like I always did because I was mom, because I was lonely, because I wanted to be included. But something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of a heavy door closing and locking for the final time. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. A lady doesn't make scenes. I reached into my purse. My hands were steady now. I pulled out my wallet. I took out 3 $20 bills, $60. Enough for my soup and my water, plus a generous tip for the waiter who had to witness this. I placed the cash on the table right next to the bread basket. "What are you doing?" Oscar asked, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "I'm paying for my dinner," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. "I wouldn't want to be a burden on your finances. After all, you have a big day tomorrow." I stood up. My knees felt strong. "Mom, sit down," Oscar hissed, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "You're embarrassing us." "No, Oscar," I said. "I think you've embarrassed yourself enough." I looked at Lorraine. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I hope you enjoy the journal. Maybe you can write down today as the day you learned that words have consequences." I turned my back on them. I walked away from the table. My heart was pounding in my chest, beating a rhythm of anger and grief, but my head was high. I walked past the dessert cart. I walked past the hostess stand. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cool Denver night air. Just before the door closed behind me, I heard Trisha's voice loud and shrill, carrying over the noise of the restaurant. So dramatic. Don't worry about her, babe. Just make sure that transfer clears by 9 a.m. for the dealership. We can't lose that car." I stopped on the sidewalk. The streetlights blurred for a second as tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Make sure the transfer clears by 9 a.m. I looked at my watch. It was 8 p.m. The bank opened at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. I I took a deep breath. The cold air filled my lungs. For the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel like a charity case. I felt powerful. They thought I was a nobody. They thought I was a helpless old woman who needed their scraps. They were about to find out that this nobody held the keys to their entire kingdom. I walked to my sensible 10-year-old sedan parked down the street. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment in the silence. By 9:00 a.m., I whispered to the empty car. I started the engine. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going home to prepare. Oscar wanted to play the big man. Fine. Tomorrow morning, I was going to let him see exactly how small he really was, without his mother's wallet standing underneath him. The charity case was officially closed. I slept better that night than I had in 20 years. Usually I wake up at 3:00 a.m., my mind racing with lists. Did I pay Oscar's electricity bill? Did I remember to send the check for Lorraine's piano lessons? Did Trisha like the scarf I bought her? Or is it sitting in the donation pile already? Worry was my constant companion. It slept next to me in the empty space where my husband used to be, but not this morning. When I opened my eyes, the sun was streaming through the sheer curtains, painting stripes of gold on the carpet. The house was quiet. My chest didn't feel tight. My stomach didn't churn. I felt light. It was a strange sensation, like setting down a heavy backpack after hiking for miles. I looked at the clock. 7:15 a.m. I got out of bed and made my coffee. I took my time. I didn't rush to check my phone. I didn't look for the good morning text from Oscar that never came anyway. I sat in my sunroom and watched a cardinal land on the feeder. He cracked a seed, ate the heart, and flew away. Eat what you need, leave the rest, I whispered to myself. I had been letting my family eat everything, the seeds, the heart, the shell. They were picking me clean, and I had been thanking them for it. At 7:45 a.m., I went into my home office. It's a small room cluttered with old photos and stacks of paperwork. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the thick red folder labeled Oscar and Trisha. I opened it. It was a graveyard of my retirement. There were the receipts for the kitchen remodel they had to have because the old granite was dated $45,000. There was the statement for the credit card I let Oscar carry for emergencies, which was currently maxed out with charges for golf clubs and spa days. And right on top was the receipt from yesterday, a deposit slip, $30,000 transferred from my savings to our joint checking account, the down payment. I ran my finger over the numbers. That money was supposed to be for my future care. It was supposed to be there so I wouldn't be a burden on anyone when I got too old to walk. Instead, it was about to become a luxury SUV with heated seats for a woman who called me a charity case. Not today, I said aloud. I dressed carefully. I put on my good blazer, the one I used to wear when I was working as a paralegal. I put on my lipstick. I grabbed my purse and the red folder. I drove to the bank in silence. The city was waking up. Commuters were rushing to jobs they hated to pay for things they didn't need. I drove past the elementary school where I used to pick Oscar up. I remembered him running to me with a scraped knee, crying, needing his mommy. It hurt. I won't lie to you and say it didn't hurt. A mother's love is a stubborn thing. It wants to forgive. It wants to say he didn't mean it. But then I heard Lorraine's voice in my head again. Charity case. And I heard Oscar's laugh. That weak, nervous laugh. He wasn't that little boy with the scraped knee anymore. He was a grown man who was willing to let his mother be humiliated to impress his wife. I pulled into the bank parking lot at 8:25 a.m. I was the first one there. I watched through the glass doors as the tellers unlocked their drawers and turned on their computers. At exactly 8:30 a.m., the security guard unlocked the door. "Good morning, Mrs." "Doe," he said, holding the door open. He smiled. "You're up early." "Big day, Frank," I said. "Big day." I walked straight to the glass office in the back. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, was just sitting down with his coffee. He'd been handling my account since my husband passed. He was a good man, old school. He knew the value of $1. He looked up surprised. "Diane, I didn't expect to see you. Is everything all right? Did the transfer go through?" "Okay." He knew about the $30,000. I had been in yesterday fretting over it, making sure it would be available for them by 9 a.m. today. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. I placed the red folder on his desk. "Good morning, Robert." I said, "No. The transfer is exactly what I'm here about. It hasn't cleared yet, has it?" He typed something on his keyboard. "It's scheduled to post in." He glanced at his watch, about 20 minutes 9 a.m. Sharp, just like you asked. "It's sitting in the pending status on the joint account." "Cancel it," I said. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to get louder. Mr. Henderson blinked. "I'm sorry." "Cancel it," I repeated. "Reverse the transfer. Put the $30,000 back into my personal savings account, the one that only has my name on it." He looked at me over his glasses. He didn't ask why. He saw the set of my jaw. He saw the lack of hesitation in my eyes. He started typing. "Done," he said. "The funds are back in your primary savings." "Thank you," I said. "Now I need to make some other changes. The joint account ending in 4598, the one Oscar uses for the mortgage and household bills. Yes, I want my name removed from it today, right now." Mr. Henderson stopped typing. He leaned back. "Diane, if you remove your name, you won't have access to see the transactions. And if that account goes into overdraft, the bank won't be able to pull from your savings to cover it anymore. You've got the overdraft protection linked." I know I said that is the point. I want the overdraft protection removed. I want the automatic transfers for the mortgage canceled. I want the automatic payments for the credit card canceled. I want my name off everything. He looked concerned. Did something happen? This is a drastic move. Oscar usually relies on that safety net. Oscar is 42 years old. "Robert," I said, smoothing my skirt. "It's time he learned to walk without a net." For the next 20 minutes, the only sound was the clicking of keys and the whir of the printer. I signed paper after paper. Revocation of power of attorney signed, removal of authorized user signed, cancellation of recurring transfer signed. With every signature, I felt a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't just signing banking forms, I was signing my own Emancipation Proclamation. I was taking back my dignity $1 at a time. "All right," Mr. Henderson said, finally handing me a receipt. "It's done. You have total control of your assets. The joint account is now solely in Oscar's name. It currently has a balance of," he squinted at the screen, $4,216. I almost laughed. $42. That was what my son had to his name without me, and he was on his way to buy a $80,000 car. "Thank you, Robert," I said. I stood up and shook his hand. "You have a wonderful day." "You too, Diane," he said, looking at me with a newfound respect. "You look well." "I feel well," I said. I walked back out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the world go by. It was 9:10 a.m. My phone buzzed against the center console. Then it buzzed again. Then a long vibration. A phone call. I picked it up. Oscar calling. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear his voice yet. I wanted to enjoy the silence a little longer. The ringing stopped. Then a text message popped up on the screen. I put on my reading glasses. "Oscar. Mom. I'm at the dealership. The finance guy is asking for the confirmation number for the funds. Transfer hasn't shown up yet. Send it now. We're in a hurry." I stared at the screen. No. Hello? No. How are you? Just a demand, just an order to his servant. Then a second text bubbled up. "Oscar. And seriously, don't be petty about last night. Trisha is stressed. Just get it done. Don't be petty." That was the phrase that did it. Standing up for myself was petty. Refusing to be insulted was petty. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who knows she is holding the ace of spades. I tapped the reply box. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately. I didn't want to make a typo. I wanted every word to be perfect. I typed, "A charity case doesn't have $30,000 to give. I'm sure a successful man like you can handle his own bills. Ask your wife to pay for it." I read it over. It was harsh. It was final. It was the truth. I pressed send. The little bubbles swooshed away. Delivered. My phone immediately started to ring. Oscar calling. I looked at his name on the screen. For years, that name had made me jump. It had made me reach for my checkbook. It had made me apologize for things I hadn't done. Not anymore. I reached out and slid the little switch on the side of my phone. Silence. Then I went into the settings. Do not disturb. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I started the engine of my sensible sedan. I had errands to run. I needed to go to the grocery store. I needed to buy birdseed. The cardinal was hungry, and unlike my son, the cardinal was grateful. As I pulled out of the bank parking lot, I imagined the scene at the dealership. I imagined Tricia picking out the color of the leather. I imagined Oscar checking his phone, waiting for the money that was never coming. I knew he was sitting at that desk, smiling at the salesman, completely unaware that the cliff he was standing on had just crumbled into the sea. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to catch him. I just turned on the radio and drove. I wasn't there when the bomb went off. I was standing in the bulk aisle of the grocery store weighing out sunflower seeds for my bird feeder. But I didn't need to be in that dealership showroom to know exactly what was happening. I know my son. I know his wife. And I know the specific quiet horror of a credit card machine that refuses to beep. Later, I would piece together the details from the voicemails, the angry texts, and the most satisfying part, a discreet phone call from the dealership manager who I've known for 10 years. It was 9:30 a.m. By my calculation, Tricia would have already been sitting inside the car. I can picture it perfectly. The dealership was one of those glass-walled palaces where everything smells like new leather and espresso. Tricia wouldn't have just walked in. She would have made an entrance. She would be wearing her oversized sunglasses, holding a latte, acting like she owned the place. She had probably already claimed the vehicle. It was a pearl white SUV, the kind that looks like a spaceship. I imagine she was sitting in the driver's seat, running her hands over the steering wheel, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was probably already taking a selfie to post online. Caption new wheels. Blessed. Oscar, on the other hand, would have been sweating. My son has a tell when he's nervous. He tugs at his collar and clears his throat repeatedly. He would have been sitting at the salesman's desk, tapping his foot, checking his phone every 30 seconds. He was waiting for my text. He was waiting for me to say, "Done. Money sent. Sorry for the delay," but that text never came. Instead, he was sitting across from Gary the salesman. Gary is a nice man. He sold me 3 cars over the last 15 years. He's patient, but he's also a businessman. "All right, Oscar," Gary would have said, tapping on his keyboard. "We have the paperwork ready. We just need to finalize that down payment we discussed, the $30,000. Did the transfer clear, Oscar would have smiled. That charming fake smile he uses when he's trying to hide a disaster. "Oh, absolutely. Mom Diane, she was sending it over this morning. It should be there any second. You know how banks are. Slow." "Let me check," Gary said. This is the moment time stops. I can imagine the silence in that office, the hum of the air conditioner, Tricia honking the horn playfully from the showroom floor, waving at Oscar through the glass. She had no idea she was sitting in a pumpkin that was about to lose its magic. Gary frowned at his screen. He hit the refresh button. Then he hit it again. "It's not showing," Oscar Gary said. His voice wasn't mean, just factual. "The account balance is, well, it's $42. Oscar's stomach must have dropped through the floor. That's impossible. Try the card. Just run the debit card. The overdraft protection is linked to her savings. It'll go through." That was their safety net. That was the magic trick they had relied on for a decade. Even if the checking account was empty, my life savings was always there to catch them. Gary nodded. "Okay, let's try the card." He swiped it. Processing. Processing? I was putting a bag of apples in my cart at the store when it happened. Declined. Oscar would have laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Must be a chip error. Wipe it off. Try it again. Gary tried it again. Declined. Insufficient funds. It's not working. Oscar Gary said, sliding the card back across the desk. "The link to the secondary funding source has been severed. There's no money available. At this point, Trisha must have realized something was wrong. She would have seen Oscar's face, pale, shiny with sweat. She climbed out of the SUV, slamming the heavy door with a thud that echoed through the showroom. She marched over to the desk, her heels clicking on the tile floor. "What is taking so long?" she snapped. "I want to get the car detailed before lunch." "Why aren't we signing papers?" "There's a hiccup with the funds," Oscar mumbled, staring at his shoes. "What hiccup?" Trisha demanded. She turned to Gary. "Just run it again." "I did, ma'am," Gary said. "It's declined." Trisha whipped her head toward Oscar. Her eyes narrowed. "Call her. Call your mother. She probably messed up the routing number. She's getting senile, I swear." Oscar pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking. He dialed my number. "I saw the call coming while I was checking out at the register. Oscar." I let it ring. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. She's not answering. Oscar whispered, "Call her again." Trisha practically screamed. People were starting to stare now. Other customers were looking over from the coffee station. This wasn't the image Trisha wanted to project. He called again. Voicemail. "She's ignoring me," Oscar said, panic rising in his voice. "She sent me a text earlier. She said what?" Trisha grabbed the phone from his hand. She read the text I had sent, the one about the charity case. Her face went red. Not pink, red. Is she joking? She thinks she can teach us a lesson today of all days. Trisha slammed the phone down on the desk. "Well, fix it, Oscar. Pay for it from your investment account. We'll just transfer it back later." And this is the moment I was waiting for. The moment the lie fell apart. Oscar froze. He looked at his wife. He looked at the salesman. He looked at the floor. I can't," he whispered. "What do you mean you can't?" Trisha yelled. "You make 6 figures. You're the VP of sales. Just write a check." Gary cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at the screen, then at Trisha. He decided to put them out of their misery. "Ma'am," Gary said gently, "the financing for this vehicle, it wasn't based on Oscar's income alone. He didn't qualify for this tier of luxury vehicle on his single salary. The debt-to-income ratio was too high." Trisha stopped breathing. "What the loan?" Gary explained, turning the monitor so they could see. "It was approved based on the co-signer's assets. Diane Doe, it was her credit score and her collateral that secured the low interest rate. Without her backing, Oscar doesn't qualify for this car." The silence that followed must have been deafening. Trisha looked at the screen. She saw the numbers. She saw my name listed as primary guarantor. She turned to Oscar. "You told me you bought this. You told me you paid for the house. You told me your mother was just that we were helping her." Oscar couldn't speak. He was shrinking in his chair, looking smaller and smaller. The arrogant man who had laughed at me the night before was gone. In his place was a frightened little boy who had been caught stealing cookies. "He doesn't pay for the house, ma'am," Gary added, perhaps a bit unhelpfully, but I like to think he was enjoying this a little. "The mortgage payments come from the same joint account Diane just closed. I remember because she set it up here at this desk 5 years ago." Trisha looked like she had been slapped. Her entire reality, her status, her pride, her belief that she was the queen of the family and I was the peasant, shattered. "You lied to me," she hissed at Oscar. "You made me look like an idiot. I told everyone. I posted it on Facebook." "Trisha, please," Oscar begged, reaching for her arm. "We can figure this out. We can get a lease on a Honda. We can. Don't touch me," she screamed. She grabbed her purse. She didn't look at the SUV she loved. She didn't look at Gary. She stormed out of the dealership past the other customers who were openly watching. Now Oscar sat there for a second longer. He looked at Gary. "I'm sorry, Oscar," Gary said, taking the keys off the desk and dropping them into his drawer. "I can't sell you this car. You might want to go after your wife." Oscar stood up. He looked defeated. He walked out the door, his shoulders slumped. They had arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume and arrogance. They left in their dented 4-year-old sedan, screaming at each other before they even got out of the parking lot. I loaded my groceries into my trunk. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I played it on the drive home. It was Trisha. She wasn't screaming. She sounded confused, broken, and furious. "Diane, it's Trisha. Oscar just told me. He told me everything. Pick up the phone. We need to talk. We can't go home without that car." I already told the neighbors. I deleted the message. I didn't smile. It wasn't funny, really. It was tragic. A 40-year-old man had built his life on a foundation of sand, and I had finally mercifully washed it away. They were driving home now. They were probably thinking the worst was over. They probably thought they could just go back to the house, regroup, and come scream at me in my living room until I wrote a check to fix it. But they didn't know about the locksmith. The car was just the appetizer. The main course was waiting for them at the front door. While my son was having the worst day of his life, I was checking into the Four Seasons downtown. It felt indulgent. It felt necessary. I hadn't stayed in a hotel since my husband passed away. I usually save my money. I saved it for rainy days, for college funds, for just-in-case moments that always seemed to belong to someone else. But today I realized something important. I was the rainy day and I was pouring. I requested a room on a high floor. I wanted to see the mountains. I wanted to see the city from above, where the people looked like ants and their problems looked even smaller. I set my suitcase down on the plush carpet. I ordered a pot of chamomile tea, and then I opened the app on my phone connected to the security cameras at the big colonial house on Elm Street. My house, the house they lived in. It was 10:45 a.m. I saw the old sedan pull into the driveway. It was driving too fast. Oscar slammed on the brakes, jerking the car to a halt inches from the garage door. They sat there for a moment. I could see their silhouettes through the windshield. Trisha's hands were flying around. She was screaming. Oscar was gripping the steering wheel, his head bowed. Lorraine was in the back seat, her face pressed against the glass, looking bored and annoyed. Finally, the car doors opened. Trisha stepped out first. She slammed her door so hard I winced even though I was 5 miles away. She marched toward the front porch, her high heels clicking aggressively on the walkway. Oscar trailed behind her, looking like a man walking to the gallows. "Just open the door, Oscar." Trisha's voice was tiny through the camera's microphone, but the anger was clear. "I need to change out of these clothes. I feel like an idiot." I'm coming," Oscar muttered. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys. I took a sip of my tea. This was the part one had been planning since 8:35 a.m. You see, after I left the bank, I didn't just go to the grocery store. I made a phone call to a locksmith I've used for my rentals in the past. I told him it was an emergency. I told him I needed the locks changed on my primary residence immediately. I told him the current tenants had become volatile. He met me there at 9:30 a.m. He was fast. He changed the front door, the back door, and even the side door to the garage. He gave me the new keys and I gave him a generous tip. Oscar walked up the steps. He didn't notice the shiny new brass on the door handle yet. He was too distracted. He jammed his key into the lock. It went in halfway, then stopped. He jiggled it. Nothing. He pulled it out, looked at it, and shoved it back in. He tried to turn it. It wouldn't budge. "What is wrong with you?" Trisha snapped, standing behind him with her arms crossed. "Open the door. It's stuck," Oscar said. "The key won't turn." "Give it to me." Trisha snatched the keys from his hand. She shoved the key into the lock and twisted it with all her strength. Snap. I watched on my screen as half the key broke off inside the lock. "Great," Trisha screamed. "Just great, Oscar. You haven't maintained this house in years. The lock is broken." "It's not broken," Oscar said slowly. He was leaning in, looking closely at the doorframe. "It looks new." He reached out and touched the brass plate. It was gleaming in the morning sun. Then he looked down. I had taped a white envelope to the door and I leveled. I used blue painter's tape so it wouldn't damage the finish. I still cared about the woodwork. After all, what is that? Trisha asked. Oscar pulled the envelope off the door. He turned it over in my nest, cursive I had written to the tenants. He ripped it open. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. It wasn't a long letter. I didn't feel the need to write a novel. The message was simple. Oscar read it, his shoulders dropped about 3 in. "Read it," Tricia demanded. "What does she say? Is she apologizing?" Oscar looked at his wife. His face was pale. "No, she's not apologizing." He started to read aloud. "Dear Oscar and Tricia, since you made it clear last night that I am a nobody and a charity case, I realized it was unfair of me to burden you with living in a house owned by such a person. A charity case certainly can't afford to maintain a 4-bedroom home in this neighborhood." Oscar swallowed hard. "Therefore, I have taken possession of my property effective immediately. The locks have been changed. Since you were so confident about buying a luxury SUV this morning, I assume you have ample funds to secure your own housing. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. Please contact my attorney, Mr. Davis, to arrange a supervised time to pack. Do not attempt to enter the premises. The alarm code has also been changed." Oscar stopped reading. The paper fluttered in his hand. Signed the landlord. Silence. Absolute silence. On the front porch, a squirrel ran across the lawn. A car drove by, but Oscar and Tricia stood there like statues. Then the explosion happened. Tricia let out a shriek that distorted the audio on my phone. She threw her purse at the door. "She can't do this!" Tricia screamed. "We live here. This is our house. My clothes are in there. My jewelry." Technically, Oscar whispered, staring at the letter. "It's her house. Her name is on the deed. We just pay the utilities. You told me it was ours," Tricia yelled, turning on him. She started hitting his chest with her fists. "You told me she put it in your name years ago. I thought she would." Oscar defended himself, backing away. "She said she would leave it to me in the will. I didn't think she'd actually kick us out while she was still alive." "Well, she did." Tricia walked up to the door and started pounding on it with her palms. "Diane, open this door. I know you're in there. Open it right now. This is illegal. You can't lock us out." I took another sip of tea. It was still warm. "I'm not in there, dear," I said to the empty hotel room. I watched as Lorraine got out of the car. She looked scared. She walked up to her parents. "Mom, Dad, why can't we go inside?" she asked. "I need my iPad. It's on the charger." "Shut up, Lorraine," Tricia snapped. Then she immediately covered her mouth, realizing what she had done. Lorraine's face crumbled. She started to cry. Oscar looked at his daughter. Then he looked at the house. He walked over to the window, the big bay window in the living room. He cupped his hands around his eyes and peered inside. He wouldn't see me. He would see a clean, empty living room. He would see the photos on the mantle, photos of him graduating college, photos of his wedding day, photos of a life I had subsidized for decades. He turned back to Tricia. "She's not home. The alarm light is red. If we break a window, the police will come." "So what do we do?" Tricia hissed. "We can't stand in the driveway like homeless people. The neighbors are watching." She was right. I switched camera views to the driveway cam. Mrs. Gable across the street was standing on her porch, watering her petunias with intense focus. She hadn't watered that specific petunia for 5 minutes straight in her life. She was watching every second of it. "We have to go," Oscar said. "We have to go to a hotel." "With what money?" Tricia asked, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You said the account was empty. You said the cards were declined." Oscar rubbed his face with his hands. "I have a credit card, one she doesn't know about. It has a limit of $2,000. It should get us a room for a few nights." A few nights. Tricia looked at the house again. "She'll cave by tomorrow. She always caves. She's just throwing a tantrum because of what Lorene said." "I don't know Tricia," Oscar said. He looked at the broken key in the lock. "She changed the locks. That's not a tantrum. That's permanent." They stood there for another minute, defeated. The wind blew the note on the door, making a little flapping sound. Finally, they trudged back to the car. Tricia got in the passenger seat and slammed the door. Oscar got in the driver's side. He sat there for a long time before he started the engine. I watched them back out of the driveway. They didn't look like the power couple they pretended to be. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. I closed the app on my phone. My hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, from adrenaline. It is a terrifying thing to burn a bridge while you are standing on it, but as I looked out at the mountains steady and unmoving in the distance, I realized I wasn't standing on the bridge anymore. I had crossed it. I was safe on the other side. They were the ones stuck in the canyon. I picked up the room service menu. I decided I would order lunch, a Cobb salad and a glass of Chardonnay. Then nobody was having a very busy day. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and expensive linens. There is a specific silence in a high-end hotel room. It's heavy and soft like a blanket. You don't hear the neighbors fighting. You don't hear the plumbing rattling. You just hear your own breathing steady and calm. I sat up and stretched. My back didn't hurt. For the first time in years, I hadn't spent the night tossing and turning, worrying about Oscar's credit score or Trisha's moods. I walked to the window and opened the heavy drapes. The city of Denver was waking up below me, bathed in pale morning light. I ordered breakfast, eggs Benedict fruit and a pot of Earl Grey tea. When the waiter brought it in on a silver tray with a little vase of fresh flowers, I almost cried. It wasn't the food, it was the dignity of it. No one was demanding I cook faster. No one was complaining that the toast was burnt. I was being served instead of being the servant. I took a bite of melon and checked my phone. It was dead silent. No calls, no texts. That's when I knew things were bad. Silence from Oscar doesn't mean peace. It means he is plotting. Or panic. I later learned through the grapevine of small-town gossip that always finds its way back to the mother. Exactly where they had spent the night. They hadn't gone to the Ritz. Oscar's emergency credit card, the one with the $2,000 limit, had been declined at the Marriott. Apparently, he had forgotten about the business lunch charges from last month, so they ended up at the Sleepy's Motel off the highway. You know the kind of place. The neon sign flickers. The carpet smells like stale cigarettes and regret, and the walls are thin enough to hear a pin drop in the next room. I imagine them there. 3 people used a 600 thread count sheets, squeezed into a room with 2 double beds and a scratchy polyester spread. Trisha would have been pacing the small space, stepping over their suitcases. "This is disgusting, Oscar," she would say, kicking a suitcase. "I saw a bug. I swear I saw a bug. It wasn't a bug, Trisha. It was lint." Oscar would reply, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. And then the blame game would start. It always does when the money runs out. "You lied to me for 10 years. Trisha would hiss. "You let me walk around acting like we were rich. You let me brag to my friends. Do you know what I look like now? A fraud. A complete fraud. I was trying to give you the life you wanted." Oscar would yell back, "You wanted the trips. You wanted the private school. You think my salary covers that I was drowning Trisha. I was drowning, and Mom was the only life raft I had." Well, you poked a hole in the raft, you idiot. And then there was Lorene, my granddaughter, the child who had started this entire avalanche with a single cruel sentence. She wasn't crying about the family falling apart. She wasn't worried about where they would live. She was sitting in the corner tapping furiously on her iPad. "Dad," she whined. "Dad, the internet isn't working. My game won't load. Use the motel Wi-Fi." "Lorraine," Oscar mumbled. "It's too slow," she screamed, throwing the expensive device onto the bed. "And my data isn't working either. It says data plan suspended. Fix it." Oscar would freeze. He knew why the data was suspended. I paid the family's cell phone bill. It was part of the family bundle I had set up years ago to save them money. I had canceled that along with the cable and the streaming services before I went to bed last night. "I can't fix it." Lorraine, Oscar said, his voice cracking. Grandma turned it off. "She can't do that," Lorraine yelled. "I hate her. She's ruining everything. Tell her to turn it back on. I can't tell her anything." Oscar exploded, standing up and throwing the ice bucket across the room. "She won't answer the phone." The plastic bucket hit the wall with a crack. Silence filled the small, smelly room. That was the moment Oscar decided he couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't sit in that room with his angry wife and his spoiled daughter and face the truth of his own failure. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame. He needed me. Back in my hotel room, I was pouring my second cup of tea when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from the Ring app. Motion detected at front door. I opened the app. The video feed loaded. There he was, my son. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled. He had clearly slept in it. His hair was messy. His eyes were wild. He was standing on my front porch, pounding on the door with his fist. "Mom," he shouted. "Mom, open up. I know you're in there. I saw your car parked down the street." I hadn't parked down the street. Of course my car was safely valet parked in the hotel garage. He was seeing things. He was desperate. He pounded again. "Mom, stop playing games. This isn't funny." Trisha is crying. Lorraine is crying. We slept in a motel. I watched him. I watched the boy I had carried for 9 months. The boy I had taught to tie his shoes. The man I had bailed out of every mistake he had ever made. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no urge to rush to the door and fix it. Just a deep, cold exhaustion. He pressed the doorbell button. Ding dong. Then he pressed it again. Ding dong. Ding dong. "Answer me." He screamed at the camera. He knew I could hear him. He leaned in close, his face filling the screen. "You can't do this to family. We made a mistake." "Okay." Lorraine didn't mean it. "She's 9. You're punishing us for a kid's joke." A joke. He still thought it was a joke. He still didn't understand that the joke was just the match that lit the fuse. The dynamite had been piling up for years. I pressed the talk button on my phone screen. "Go away, Oscar," I said. My voice came out of the small speaker on the doorbell. It was clear and calm. Oscar jumped back. He looked around confused before realizing I wasn't opening the door. I was speaking digitally. "Mom," he gasped. "Mom, where are you? Open the door. We need to talk face to face." "We have nothing to talk about," I said. "I left you a letter. It was very clear." The letter, Oscar laughed, a frantic, hysterical sound. "You're evicting us. Are you insane? You can't evict your own son. Where are we supposed to go?" "You have a job, Oscar." I said, "You have a salary. I suggest you use it to rent an apartment that you can actually afford. Maybe a 2-bedroom. It will be good for Lorraine to share a room. It builds character." Character. Oscar spit the word out. "You're destroying my life. Trisha is going to leave me, Mom. Do you get that she's going to leave me if I don't fix this? If she leaves you because you can't buy her a luxury SUV, then she never loved you, Oscar." I said, "I'm doing you a favor." "I don't want your favors," he screamed, kicking the door. A black scuff mark appeared on the white paint. "I want my house back. I want my money back." "It's not your house," I corrected him gently. "And it was never your money." He stopped kicking. He was panting, his chest heaving up and down. "Mom, please." He whispered, his voice breaking. He tried the strategy that had worked for 40 years. The pity card. "I'm sorry." "Okay, I'm sorry we laughed. I'm sorry Lorraine was rude. I'll make her apologize. I'll make Trisha apologize. Just please unlock the door. I don't know what to do. I'm scared." For a second, just a second, my finger hovered over the unlock button. He looked so small. He looked like my little boy again. But then I remembered the text message. "Don't be petty." I remembered the laughter at the restaurant. I remembered the way he let his wife call me a charity case while eating a steak I paid for. If I opened that door now, nothing would change. He would learn that he could abuse me, apologize, and get rewarded. He would never grow up. "You're scared," I said. "Good. You should be. That fear is called responsibility, Oscar. It's heavy, and it's time you carried it yourself." "Mom," he cried out. "You laughed when your daughter called me a charity case." I said, my voice hardening. "You agreed with her. You said Trisha isn't wrong. Well, Oscar, I am simply proving you right. A charity case has nothing to give. No money, no house, no data plan. I have nothing for you. Mom, don't. Goodbye, Oscar." "Get off my porch or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." And I think we both know that would be very embarrassing for a VP of sales. I didn't wait for his response. I pressed the red end call button. The video feed cut off. I sat there in my hotel room staring at the black screen of my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. They were shaking from the sheer effort of holding up a wall I should have built 20 years ago. I picked up my tea. It was cold now. I drank it anyway. It tasted like victory. I imagined Oscar standing there on the porch, staring at the silent plastic doorbell, finally realizing that the ATM was out of order permanently. He would have to go back to the motel. He would have to face Trisha. He would have to face Lorraine. And for the first time in his life, he would have to fix it himself. I took a deep breath. I had one more problem to deal with: the flying monkey. I knew Oscar wouldn't give up this easily. He wouldn't fight me man to man. He was too weak for that. He would send the one person he knew I had a soft spot for. He would send the child, but he was about to learn that this grandmother wasn't playing by the old rules anymore. They call it the silence before the storm. But in my family, silence is usually just the time it takes for Oscar to reload his weapon. It had been 1 week since I locked the doors. 1 week since I watched my son kick my front door and scream into the camera. Since then, I had moved back into my house. I hired a security guard to stand by the gate for the first 3 days just in case, but Oscar and Trisha hadn't returned. My lawyer, Mr. Davis, had sent them a formal email explaining that they could schedule a time to pick up their boxes, which were currently being packed by a professional moving company I had hired. I wanted them out. Clean break, no drama. I was in my garden. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My hydrangeas were thirsty. I was untangling the hose, feeling the sun on my back. It was peaceful. I had almost convinced myself that the worst was over. I thought maybe they were respecting my boundary. Then my phone rang. I wiped my dirty hands on my apron and looked at the screen. Lorraine's iPad. My heart did a little stutter step. I hadn't heard from my granddaughter since the birthday dinner, since she called me a charity case. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew that any communication should go through the lawyers, but I'm a grandmother, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and the hurt, there is still that instinct that wants to know if the child is okay. I slid the bar to answer. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Grandma." The voice was small, wobbly. It sounded like she had been crying or was trying very hard to sound like she had been. "I'm here, Lorraine," I said. I sat down on the garden bench. "Is everything all right?" "No." She sniffled. "Grandma, I'm so hungry." The words hit me like a physical punch. Hungry. For a split second, the last week vanished. I wasn't the woman who locked them out. I was the woman who baked cookies. I was the woman who made grilled cheese sandwiches with the crusts cut off. My brain immediately started plotting logistics. Where are they? I can order a pizza. I can send money. "You're hungry?" I asked. "Lorraine, where are you?" "We're at the motel," she whimpered. "The one by the highway. It smells bad. And Daddy says, we don't have money for dinner because you took it all away. He says, we have to starve because you're mad at us." My grip on the phone tightened. The plastic case dug into my palm. There it was, the script. A 9-year-old doesn't say, "You took it all away." A 9-year-old doesn't understand bank transfers. Those were Oscar's words coming out of Lorraine's mouth. He was using his own child as a human shield. He was hiding behind her, using her hunger as a weapon to pry open my wallet. "Lorraine," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "Is your father there with you?" He's in the bathroom." She lied. I could hear the hesitation. She was looking at him. I knew she was looking at him. "He's crying." "Grandma, Mommy is crying too. They're fighting all the time." "Mommy threw a lamp. I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I was sorry that my son was weak. I was sorry that he was traumatizing his daughter because he refused to get a job that actually supported his lifestyle. "Grandma, please," Lorraine begged. Her voice went up an octave. Can you just send us pizza money, or can we come sleep at your house? I miss my room. I promise I won't call you names anymore. I promise this is the moment where most people break. This is the moment where the grandma guilt takes over. You think I can't punish the child for the sins of the father. You think I'll just help this one time. But I knew the truth. If I sent pizza money next week, it would be rent money. If I let them sleep in their beds tonight, they would be calling me a charity case again by breakfast. I closed my eyes. I pictured Oscar standing over Lorraine, mouthing the words to her, coaching her performance. It made me sick. Lorraine listened to me very carefully, I said. I dropped the soft, grandmotherly tone. I used my business voice, the voice I used when I negotiated contracts. I'm listening, she whispered. You said you are hungry. You said you have no food. Is that the truth? Yes, she insisted. We haven't eaten since breakfast. Daddy says we can't afford it. Okay, I said. And you said your parents are fighting and throwing things that you don't feel safe. There was a pause, a rustling sound on the other end. Yes. Mommy is scary. All right, I said. Then I am going to help you, Lorraine. Stay right there. You're sending money, she asked, hopeful. No, I said firmly. I am going to call Child Protective Services, and I am going to call the police. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. What Lorraine asked, she sounded genuinely confused now. The script hadn't covered this part. If your father cannot afford to feed you, that is called neglect. I explained, speaking loud enough for the microphone to pick up every word. And if they are fighting and throwing lamps, that is an unsafe environment. I love you too much to let you stay in a place like that. So I will call the authorities. They will come pick you up in about 10 minutes. They will give you a warm meal, and they will find you a safe bed for the night. You won't have to be with people who starve you. Grandma, no. Lorraine started to panic. Then I heard it. The scrambling sound. The phone being snatched away. Mom, are you crazy? It was Oscar. His voice wasn't sad or crying. It was frantic. Hello, Oscar, I said coldly. I was just telling Lorraine, help is on the way. I have the number for social services right here. If you are truly destitute, if you truly cannot buy a $5 hamburger for your child, then you are unfit to care for her. I have a duty to report it. We are not destitute, Oscar shouted. We have money for food. I wanted you to see what you're doing to us. I wanted you to feel bad, so you lied. I said, you made your daughter call me and beg for food she didn't need just to manipulate me. Oscar stammered. He knew he was cornered. If he admitted he was broke, I called CPS. If he admitted he had money, he proved he was a liar and a manipulator. That is a new low Oscar. I said, even for you, using a child as a pawn, it's disgusting. You're the one who kicked us out. He deflected, but the fire was gone from his voice. He sounded tired. You're the one with the big empty house. You're the one sitting on a pile of money while we rot in this motel. My pile of money, I corrected him, and my empty house. You have a job, Oscar. You have a paycheck. If you are in a motel, it is because you have mismanaged your life, not because I have ruined it. Stop blaming me for your math. I could hear Trisha screaming in the background now. Is she sending the money? Ask her about the tuition. The school called today. She's not sending anything. Trisha. Oscar yelled back at her away from the phone. She's threatening to call the cops. He came back on the line. Mom, please, just don't call anyone. We fed her. She's fine. We had pizza for lunch. I thought if you heard her voice, you thought I was weak. I finished for him. I thought you were a mother, he whispered. I am, I said. And a mother's job is to teach her children how to survive right now. Oscar, you are learning the hardest lesson of your life, sink or swim. But do not ever use my granddaughter to beg for you again. If she calls me crying about food one more time, I won't warn you. I will send the police to your door. You understand me? He didn't answer for a long time. I could hear his breathing. Short, shallow breaths. He was realizing that the game was over. The old cheat codes didn't work. The emotional blackmail buttons were disconnected. Yeah, he said, finally I understand. Good, I said. Tell Lorraine I love her, and tell her that Grandma isn't mad at her. Grandma is just waiting for her father to grow up. I hung up the phone. I sat there on the garden bench for a long time. My hands were shaking again. It wasn't easy. Don't let anyone tell you it's easy to hear your family begging and say no. It goes against every fiber of your being. It feels cruel. But then I looked at my hydrangeas. They were drooping. They needed water. But if I just poured water on the leaves, they would rot. I had to water the roots. Oscar was the root and he was rotten. I picked up the hose and turned on the water. I had to focus on the things I could save. I knew that call was their last desperation play. They had tried anger. They had tried public humiliation. Now they had tried pity. They had nothing left. Now they would have to face the one thing they had been avoiding for years, reality. And I had a feeling that reality was going to include a very uncomfortable meeting with a divorce lawyer. I went back to watering my flowers. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. I was alone in my garden. And for the first time in a week, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. There is a specific kind of silence that exists inside a lawyer's conference room. It smells like mahogany polish and lemon furniture wax, but underneath that, it smells like fear. It is the place where families go to die and where contracts go to be born. I arrived 15 minutes early. I always do. I had spent the morning preparing. I went to the salon and had my hair blown out. I wore my best cream-colored suit, the one with the pearl buttons. I put on my favorite lipstick, a shade called Victory Red. I didn't dress like a victim. I didn't dress like a charity case. I dressed like the woman who owned the building. Mr. Davis, my attorney, sat at the head of the long table. He was a man of few words and expensive billing hours. He had arranged the paperwork in neat little stacks. They are late, he noted, checking his watch. It was 10:05 a.m. They are probably having trouble finding parking for the sedan, I said, taking a sip of water. They aren't used to parking in the general lot. They usually valet. At 10:12 a.m., the heavy oak door creaked open. If I had any lingering doubts about my decision, any tiny crumbs of guilt left over from Lorraine's phone call, they evaporated the moment I saw them. Oscar walked in first. He looked 10 years older than he had last week. His shoulders were slumped forward. His shirt was untucked on one side, and he had dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. He didn't look at me. He looked at the carpet. Tricia followed him, and oh, how the mighty had fallen. Gone were the designer sunglasses. Gone was the perfectly highlighted hair. Her roots were showing a half-inch of dark reality creeping into her blonde fantasy. She was wearing sweatpants. Designer sweatpants, yes, but sweatpants nonetheless. She looked tired, angry, and cornered. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The distance between us was only 4 ft of wood, but it felt like an ocean. "Good morning," Mr. Davis said. He didn't smile. "Thank you for joining us. We are here to finalize the separation of assets and to discuss the eviction notice served to Mr. Oscar Doe and Mrs. Tricia Doe regarding the property at 45 Elm Street." Tricia made a noise in her throat. A scoff. "Eviction notice. You make it sound like we're criminals. We're family." She looked at me then. Her eyes were hard. "How can you sit there, Diane? How can you sit there looking so smug while your granddaughter is sleeping in a motel?" I folded my hands on the table. I didn't flinch. "I look rested, Tricia." I corrected her because for the first time in 10 years, I am not awake at night worrying about how to pay for your lifestyle. And as for the motel, that is a choice. You could rent an apartment. You could get a job. You have options. You just don't like them. "I have a job," Tricia snapped. "I manage the household." "There is no household to manage anymore," I said calmly. Mr. Davis cleared his throat. "Ladies, please, let's stick to the agenda. Mrs. Doe Diane has made a generous offer to resolve this matter quickly, without litigation. He slid a document across the table toward Oscar. Oscar looked at it. His hand shook as he reached for his reading glasses. The offer is simple, Mr. Davis explained. Diane is selling the house on Elm Street. She has already accepted a cash offer from an investor. Closing is in 30 days. You sold it, Oscar whispered. His voice was cracked. But that's my childhood home. That's where I grew up. It is a house, Oscar, I said. Bricks and wood. It was an asset. And since you couldn't respect the owner, the asset has been liquidated. Where does the money go? Tricia asked sharply. The equity. We put work into that house. We did the kitchen. We did the landscaping. With Diane's money, Mr. Davis interjected smoothly. We have the receipts, Mrs. Doe. Every contractor, every appliance, every shrub was paid for by Diane's checkbook. Therefore, the proceeds from the sale, estimated to be around $600,000, will be deposited entirely into Diane's retirement trust. Tricia's mouth fell open. All of it. You're keeping all of it. I am retiring. I said, I am 68 years old. I have given you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, Tricia. Consider that your inheritance. You spend it early, but we have a child, Tricia screamed. She slammed her hand on the table. We have a daughter. What about her college fund? What about her future you're stealing from your own grandchild? This was the argument I knew was coming. The shield, the weapon. Lorraine is intelligent. I said she can get scholarships or she can get student loans like millions of other children, or I paused, looking directly at Oscar. Her father can start saving for her today instead of buying luxury cars. I can't save anything, Oscar blurted out. He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. I'm drowning, Mom. I have credit card debt. I have the car lease on the sedan. I have nothing. Then you have work to do. I said, it's not my job to be your life raft anymore, Oscar. I am the shore. You have to swim to me. I can't keep jumping in and drowning with you. Oscar stared at me. He looked at Tricia, who was red-faced and panting with rage. Then he looked back at me, and something broke behind his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was the facade. The mask he had been wearing for 20 years finally cracked. He put his head down on the table and he started to sob, not the fake crying he did on the phone. This was real. It was the ugly, heaving sobbing of a man who realizes he has lost everything. I just wanted to be big, he choked out. The room went silent. Tricia stopped yelling. What? I asked softly. Oscar lifted his head. Tears were running down his face, dripping onto the legal documents. I felt so small, he whispered. You always handled everything, Mom. You were always so strong. Dad died, and you just kept going. You paid for college. You paid for the wedding. I felt like a little boy. I wanted to feel like a man. I wanted Tricia to look at me the way she looks at rich guys. He gestured helplessly to his wife. So I pretended I was paying for it. And when Lorraine called you a charity case, I laughed because it made me feel powerful. For 1 second, I wasn't the son asking for money. I was the big man sitting at the head of the table. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm not sorry about the money. I mean, I am, but I'm sorry I tried to make you small just so I could feel big. I sat there frozen. It was the truth. Finally, after decades of lies, excuses, and deflections, my son had finally told me the truth. He humiliated me because he was jealous of me. He bit the hand that fed him because he resented needing to be fed. I reached across the table. I didn't touch him. I just rested my hand near his. Thank you for saying that, Oscar, I said. My voice was thick with emotion. I forgive you. Tricia let out a breath of relief. She sat up straighter. She smoothed her hair. She thought she had won. She thought forgive meant fix. See, Tricia said, smiling nervously. He's sorry, Diane. He's really sorry. We can work this out. Maybe we don't have to sell the house. Maybe we can just refinance. And I picked up the black pen from the table. I forgive you for the humiliation, Oscar, I said, keeping my eyes on my son. I forgive you for the lies. I love you. You are my son. I uncapped the pen, but forgiveness is an emotional act. I said restitution is a financial one. What does that mean? Tricia asked, her smile faltering. It means I accept your apology, I said, but I am still selling the house. I pressed the pen to the paper. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Scratch, scratch. I signed my name, Diane Doe. I slid the paper toward Oscar. Sign it. I said it acknowledges that you will vacate the property in 30 days. If you don't sign it, the sheriff will come, and I don't want Lorraine to see the sheriff. Tricia grabbed Oscar's arm. Don't sign it. She's bluffing. She just said she loves you. Oscar looked at his wife. He looked at the woman who had demanded a luxury SUV while his mother paid the electric bill. He looked at the woman who was currently wearing sweatpants and screaming in a lawyer's office. Then he looked at me. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw that I loved him enough to stop enabling him. He gently pulled his arm away from Tricia. She's not bluffing, Tricia. Oscar said quietly, she's done. He picked up the pen. His hand was steady this time. He signed his name next to mine. No, Tricia shrieked. You idiot, you just signed away our home. No, Oscar said, capping the pen and handing it back to Mr. Davis. I just signed away Mom's home. We have to go find ours. He stood up. He didn't wait for Tricia. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me. I'll call you, he said. On Sunday just to talk. No asking for money. I'll answer. I said, as long as that's true. He nodded and walked out. Tricia sat there for a second, stunned. She looked at the signed paper. She looked at me. She realized that for the first time in her marriage, she couldn't manipulate the outcome. She grabbed her purse and ran after him. Oscar, wait, you can't just leave me here. The door closed behind them. The room was quiet again. The smell of fear was gone, replaced by the smell of ink and finality. Mr. Davis organized the papers into a folder. He looked at me with a rare expression of approval. That was difficult, he said. Yes, I said. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I felt lighter. I felt like I could fly. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But you know what, Mr. Davis? What's that, Diane? I think I just got my son back. The real one, not the one who needed my checkbook. I walked out of the office and into the bright midday sun. I had a house to sell. I had a retirement to plan. And for the first time in a long time, I had a life that belonged entirely to me. 6 months. That is how long it takes to sell a 4-bedroom colonial pack up 40 years of memories and move into a 2-bedroom condo with a view of the park. People asked me if I was sad to leave the big house. They asked if I missed the garden, the space, the prestige of the address. I told them the truth. A house is just a box you keep your stuff in. A home is where you find peace. And for the first time in a decade, I have peace. My new place is small. I have a little balcony where I grow herbs, basil, mint, rosemary. I don't have a guest room for moochers. I don't have a basement full of my son's old trophies. I have just enough space for me. I sat on my balcony this morning with my tea. I opened my banking app. I didn't open it with fear anymore. I didn't open it wondering if a pending transaction for a luxury SUV was going to wipe me out. I opened it and saw my retirement fund. It was sitting there, safe and untouched. It was growing. It's funny. When you stop pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, the bucket actually stays full. I wish I could tell you that everything is perfect with my family. I wish I could tell you that we have Sunday dinners and laugh about the great lockout like it was a funny sitcom episode. But real life isn't a sitcom. Real life leaves scars. Oscar and Tricia are still married, which surprised me. I thought she would leave him the moment the money dried up. But poverty has a way of binding people together. They live in a rental complex on the south side of town. It's a beige building with thin walls and a parking lot that is always full. They drive the old sedan. It has a dent in the bumper now. Tricia had to go back to work. She got a job at the cosmetics counter at the mall. I walked past it once just to see. I watched her standing there for 8 hours in comfortable shoes, wiping down glass counters and being polite to customers who ignored her. She looked tired. She looked older, but she also looked real. She was earning her own money. She couldn't brag about a Porsche anymore, but she could pay for her own groceries. There is dignity in that, even if she doesn't feel it yet. Oscar is working overtime. He picked up extra shifts. He handles the regional accounts now, which means he travels a lot. He looks exhausted, but when we talk on the phone, brief 10-minute calls on Sundays, he sounds different. He sounds heavier but stronger. He isn't the VP of sales pretending to be a millionaire. He is a man paying off his debts. He doesn't ask me for money. He knows the answer is no. And because he knows the answer is no, we actually talk about the weather. We talk about sports. We talk about things that don't have a dollar sign attached to them. And then there is Lorene. I see my granddaughter once a month. I pick her up from school and we go for lunch. We don't go to the expensive Italian restaurant with the white tablecloths anymore. We go to a diner. We get burgers and milkshakes. Last week, when the waitress brought the check, Lorene did something that made my heart stop. She looked at the bill. Then she looked at me. "Thank you, Grandma," she said. She didn't mumble it. She didn't say it while looking at an iPad. She looked me in the eye. "You're welcome, honey." I said, "Mom says burgers are expensive." She said, quietly dipping a fry into ketchup. She says we have to eat leftovers at home. Burgers cost money. I agreed. Someone had to work to pay for this. I know. She said, "Dad works a lot. Mom works, too." She ate her burger with both hands. She didn't complain about the brand of ketchup. She didn't call me a nobody. She wiped her mouth with a napkin. In that moment, I realized that the charity case insult she threw at me 6 months ago was actually the best thing that ever happened to this family. If I hadn't stopped the money, Lorene would have grown up thinking she was a princess who deserved the world on a silver platter. She would have turned into Trisha. She would have married a man just to bleed him dry. Now she knows the value of $1. She knows that a milkshake is a treat, not a right. I drove her home after lunch. I dropped her off at the beige apartment complex. I watched her walk up the stairs carrying her backpack. She waved at me before she went inside. I drove back to my quiet condo. I sat in my garden chair as the sun started to set. The sky was turning a beautiful shade of purple. For 40 years, I defined myself as a provider. I thought my job was to cushion the fall. I thought love meant saying yes. I thought if I stopped giving, they would stop loving me. And the truth is, a part of them did stop loving me. The part of them that loved my wallet died. The part of them that loved my credit score hates me. But the part that's left, the part that is rebuilding itself from the rubble, that part respects me. I took a sip of my tea. It was still warm. I lost the title of the bank. I lost the title of the savior. I even lost the title of the nice grandmother. But I looked at my phone. There was a text from Oscar. Just a picture of a sunset he saw from his office window. No caption, no request, just a sunset. I smiled. I saved my son. I didn't save him from debt. I didn't save him from embarrassment. I saved him from being a permanent child. I broke his legs so he would finally have to learn how to stand up. I was their bank for 40 years now. I'm just their mother, and that is enough. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life.